Okay, welcome to Inland Valley Storytellers. And since we have a new person that hasn't been to one of these Zoom meetings, I think we're going to do going around introducing each other. So, and I'm going to start it. My name's John St. Clair. I'm a retired public school teacher, and I love both listening to stories and telling stories. And I'm the leader of this group. Okay, Jean, do you want to be next?
Sure. I'm Jean Hibben, and Karen, you may or may not remember me. I've hung out with this group a long time ago. I live in Riverside County, up in Lake Matthews area. I am a retired educator. I was a college professor for a number of years, and I quit teaching and went on and got a doctorate in folklore. Unfortunately, I have been spending a lot of time making a living and kind of got out of storytelling. In this type of a format for quite a while, and decided it's time to come back. I don't have to travel so far, and right there.
Yeah,
right.
That's great. It's great to see you again, Jean.
Good to see you, Karen.
Okay. Penny, you can go next.
Oh, well, my name is Penny Post, and I live currently in Hingham, Massachusetts, which is on the south shore of south of Boston.
What?
But I lived in Los Angeles for 30 years and discovered storytelling there. Did a lot of performance, a lot of workshops, had some house concerts. Hosted house concerts. And I am thrilled to be back in connection with California Tellers.
Wow.
Yeah, and Karen and I took a workshop with Jay O'Callahan many years ago.
Yes,
Wow.
that was so wonderful. He was so great.
Elizabeth, you want to be next? Yeah, you got to unmute.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see new people joining us. I am also a retired educator, college librarian, and storytelling for many years, but not very consistent. And I am in Riverside. I'm talking to you from Riverside. And looking forward to tonight meeting and concert and beautiful pieces that I'm sure will come along. Thank you.
Karen?
And I'm Karen Raykraut, and I now live in Palm Desert, California.
Wow.
So I'm a little farther away, but it would still be so great to see all of you in person sometime soon. And I just want to say that I was very inspired by Walter last month and just loved Walter's story. And so I was inspired to go kind of in that direction myself, which I normally never do. So I always get fresh, exciting inspiration from this group.
And last but not least,
Me.
yes.
Well, thank you very much for that compliment. I try to push myself to try different kinds of stories and to see what works. I find that you people are so empowering because you're so nice, you're so accepting that I don't feel so intimidated. I am also a retired educator. I'm an elementary school teacher and special educator for 36 years. And I'm also a hiker, and that's how I met John St. Clair. And he's the guy that got me involved in the storytelling, basically because, well, he kept encouraging me, and then he was telling stories on our backpacks or our mule packs. And so I kind of took the plunge and tried it.
Ooh.
I kind of liked it. So that's why I'm here.
And you live in Riverside.
And I do live in Riverside, yes.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay, so let's see, what was I going to say? One thing about Walt, he would tell the stories on these mule pack trips, so he'd never come to our meetings. But with Zoom, he doesn't have to come to our meetings. He can stay in the comfort of his own home and tell his stories that way. And I also was blown away by your story. It was such a well-crafted personal story, Walter. And personal stories are my weakness. I don't do them well. And and I was impressed with how well crafted that story was. It was excellent.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, so who would like to tell the first story? Okay, Jean. and the rest of us, let's mute ourselves while she's.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Nothing like having the newbie in the group to jump up and say, "Me too, me, I want to do that." But I really do love the storytelling medium, and apparently so did my family members. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my father. My father was an educator, what a shock, and a musician. And when he was a kid, he was a ham radio operator. He enjoyed doing ham radio, had a lot of friends in the area, and they would get online, or I guess it's not online, is it? On the air, and just talk for hours, from what I understand. And one of his friends in the village where they lived, and it's the same village I grew up in, it's Wilmette, Illinois, which is north of Chicago. It's actually, if you were traveling by the lake, it's one harbor north of Chicago, but it's actually 2 towns north. Anyway, my father's friend of his said, "There's this guy in Chicago. He's got a job. He needs a ham radio operator for it. I think you'd be perfect." And so my dad went down into Chicago and met the man on his yacht. What this man was planning was a yacht trip to go all the way up into Lake Superior to a little place they called Isle Royal. It's still there. It's a national park. And when he went, when he was interviewed to go, there were not a whole lot of people that visited. It's not like today where you go in and you sign in, in order to camp or hike or anything, you have to make sure everyone knows where you are, because it's a pretty rugged area. But back then it was so rugged, they did not have any communication from Isle Royal to the mainland. And that's one of the things they wanted my father to do, is set up communications. But they also had a major purpose. They were doing an archaeological dig, looking for indications of the type of use the word loosely, civilization that had taken place there many years earlier, and identify the indigenous people and some of the pottery and other things that were allegedly on this island, and they were there. So my dad, who was at that time looking towards his senior year in high school, it was the end of the summer, and he was 16. He was a little ahead of the world. He kind of skipped some grades and was one of those brainy kind that made me feel a little intimidated from time to time. But anyway, he signed on, and they did their trip up into Lake Superior, and there was actually researchers, scientists that came out from the University of Chicago, from a couple of other universities, and they were going there as archaeologists, as geologists, to do this research that was funded by the man who owned the yacht. Now, the man who owned the yacht's name, I know you want to know this, his name was Eugene McDonald, and he was the CEO of Zenith Radio. And he had a companion on this whole deal whose name was Bert Massey, and he had a different yacht, and the different yacht was the one that housed the scientists, and the yacht that Mr. McDonald operated is the one where my father was bunked. Now, because he was a ham radio operator, he needed to have the radio room where he could access the antennae and that sort of thing. So instead of being down below where some of the crew slept, he was up on the main part of the yacht. It was 1928, in case you were wondering here. And so as they were sitting there doing their digging, and my father would go swimming, he would go and send radiograms to all of the newspapers, and there are all these articles that my father had put into the system, and so they appeared in the Tribune and the Sun-Times and other newspapers that weren't Chicago ones too, I assume. He sent one radiogram he sent to the president, which I thought was really cool. The president was invited to come out to this archaeological dig, which I'm sure every president has always wanted to do. Needless to say, they didn't have any VIPs visit. Well, one night, about 2 a.m, my father's asleep in his radio room because he has to man that radio essentially all the time. And so he's asleep in the radio room, and there's all this commotion outside. And so he gets up and he looks out to see what's going on. And there's another boat that is right alongside the Naroka, the yacht he was on. And they were unloading these boxes and these barrel things and stuff like that onto the yacht that my dad was on. And as he watched this, he understood what the whole thing was about and was a little bit uncomfortable because his parents were devout in their beliefs, and one of their beliefs was thou shalt not drink alcohol. And now he's on a yacht with more alcohol than he probably ever saw at any other single time in his entire life. But as it turned out, they did not get caught, but it was very close. A yacht right next to them was blown up. When that happened, the pilot or the captain of the yacht my dad was on, they moved it to the other side of the island into Canadian waters to keep things from being really uncomfortable. And there was a little bit of a event with people saw that this yacht had blown up, and now the Naroka is gone. And the immediate thought was the Naroka was the yacht that was blown up. That wasn't the case. But meanwhile, of course, the word got to my grandmother, and she kind of went a little snaky over the whole thing. And she got in touch with another ham radio operator who got in touch with somebody else. And eventually they got word to my father that your mother thinks you're dead. And so he sent through a word that, he was fine, but he did not tell them, his mother or father, what they were doing and why there might even have been a yacht blown up. I learned the story when I was in high school. Unfortunately, I didn't hear the whole story until after my grandfather died, because my dad thought I would just open my mouth and spill it all. There you have it.
All right. Thank you very much. Great story. Great story. Okay. So who would like to be next? Karen Ray. Okay. We put the spotlight for you.
So we'll have you to look forward to, Elizabeth. So I just want to share this because, like I say, this is not what I usually do. Thank you, Jean, for leading the way. And I'm taking this poetry writing class. And one of the things the wonderful instructor asked us to do was do a poem in blank verse that is like a postcard. So I just want to share this with you because what it really is a story. That's one of my family stories. So it goes like this. Dear Mom, you would have loved the snow on the mountains between Beaumont and Loma Linda today. Just like that Christmas Eve in the woods when there was no money and you knew you wouldn't get a present. But then Grandpa brought in a tiny Douglas fir that made the whole cabin smell like pine needles. And Grandma made a garland of red poisonous berries, but it was okay because you all knew not to eat them. Then when Christmas morning came, there was one tiny box under the tree just for you. And it was a beautiful gold ring that had been Aunt Daisy's, and you treasured it forever and ever until it got lost when you migrated down to Ventura to pick the strawberries. The end. Thank you for your patience.
All right, thank you.
That was very beautiful, Karen. Really gorgeous.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You're very sweet.
It was also very distilled.
Mhm.
It was beautifully distilled
Yes.
with,
Elizabeth.
with details, but not a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah,
No, I
lots
mean,
of
it
nice
left a lot to
imagery.
our imagination. It was great.
Yeah, lots of nice images.
Yeah.
Ah, Adrian, I didn't know you would join us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Adrian, hi.
Hello. Yeah, there's lots of nice images in there. That was nice.
So much.
So Elizabeth, did you raise your hand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you can be next.
If it's okay, yeah, I would like to go next.
Okay, spotlight on you.
All right. Well, today is March 8th, so is the International Day of Women. And this story is about a smart woman. Well, you know, she has help from her husband, but she is the person with the idea. And then also, this is a Ukrainian story, fairy tale in a way. And I dedicate this to Ukraine, which is under such a hardship of war at this time. I want to explain, first of all, a little bit about the story. It's called The Straw Ox, and it deals with straw and tar. And I want to make sure that we all know what tar is. It's a thick, oily, sticky substance, dark brown or black. And it is it comes up after the distillation as a residual after a distillation of natural materials like oil or coal. Also, it could be like a natural production that the earth keeps up. And we have a few examples in California, in the Carpinteria beach. It is a tar lake there, natural. And of course, the Brea tar pits that we all heard of it. And this tar was used from very, very long time, years, hundreds of years in the back, for different purposes. Like it would be used for disinfectant, for natural oils, protect the wood and things like that. And my husband, who had a very colorful childhood in the countryside, tells me that it was used as a band-aid for smaller superficial wounds, because it has some disinfectant properties. So the kids who are running and hurting their feet all summer long because they are going barefoot, they all had at one time or another a little band-aid with a string of cloth and some of this tar. And the way people got it, it was like sellers going through the villages and smaller towns and sell it from barrels that were pulled by horse carriages. So with this set, I'm gonna tell the story. That was this couple, older people, and they were very poor, living in the countryside in a region that was flat and was usually harvested with grains and corns and things like that. They didn't have any land on their own, so the man was for hire for different agricultural jobs, and the woman of the house, she spun flax to make different cloth out of flax. So the little money that they earn from their work, it was just used for food, and that's about it. They didn't have anything else to live on. So one day the woman has an idea, and she tells her husband, I want you to build me an ox out of straw and paint it all, cover it all in tar. So the husband is really very amazed. What is this? What are you going to do with an ox of straw and smeared with tar? But she insists. And then he, well, since there was anything else to do, then he goes ahead and builds this ox for her, covered in tar. So the next morning, very early in the morning, at the dawn, she leaves the house. While being that this is a fairy tale, the ox apparently walks by himself. So she takes the ox out to the fields in an area that was nice grass, and she takes the ox there to graze. And she sits on the mound a little bit away, and she starts panning at her flax, watching the ox being there grazing. And all of a sudden, she, after a while, being that she was awake so early, she kind of started dozing, and she is kind of taking a nap over there on the field. At this time, out from the dark woods and from behind the tall pines comes out a bear. The bear comes to the ox and asks, well, who are you? What are you? And the ox said, oh, I am a heifer, 3 years old, and I am all covered in tar. And the bear said, oh, you are covered in tar. Can I take a bite of you? Because I really need some straw and tar to patch my sides. They are so rugged from the entire summer. Yeah, sure, go ahead, take some. And then the bear, very excited, start on the straw ox and bit really good out of the tar. Well, his teeth got stuck into the tar, and he is pulling one side and pulling another side. No, there's no way he's gonna get free of that. And it was kind of getting high noon. The lady of the house, the woman, wakes up and she doesn't see anybody. Where is my ox? Where is my straw ox? And she said, oh, maybe he got to walk home. And she started walking home, take her walking stick and her flax and her spinning wheel, and she gets to her house. And at the house, she finds the ox was there. Where is the bear stuck on it? And then she goes inside the house and tell her husband, you know, it is a bear outside. You better go and kill it. And he goes outside and he see that, and he said, no, I'm not gonna kill it. And he takes the straw out of the bear mouth and the tar and everything, and tie it really good and put it in the cellar. Next day, the woman goes again at very early in the day and with her straw ox covered in tar. They go back to the grazing place, and she take her spinning wheel and the flax and work on that, and she's dozing again. This time, out of the dark woods and from behind the tall pines comes the wolf. What is this? Who are you? Asked the wolf of the ox. And his ox said, well, I'm a 3-year-old heifer and I'm all covered in tar. Oh, can I take some of this tar because my sides are hurt from the dogs and the dogs' sons? They come and chase me and I got all of those wounds on my sides. Can I take some tar so I can put it and heal my body? And the ox said, yeah, sure, you can do that. And the wolf go and bit his teeth in the ox and it got stuck there. The ox walks home and the woman wakes up later. She doesn't find the ox. Oh, well, it might be at home. Let's go and see. And at home, she goes there and right by the fence, the ox was there with the wolf stuck on the sides in the tar. She goes inside and she said, well, you know what? The ox has brought a wolf here, so maybe you go and kill it and skin it. So the man goes outside and he said, well, you know, I am gonna free you from this. And he takes the wolf out, ties it very well, puts it in the cellar. Well, these things repeat a few more times. The next time is the fox that is also hurt by the dogs from the village. And she needs to put tar on her wounds so she will get better, they will heal. And then the next day, it is a rabbit who gets stuck there just because he was there. He was not hurt, but he was too curious. And if you are too curious, well, things might go wrong. Now, all these creatures are now tied into the man's cellar. Next day, the wife said, well, you know what, I think we should do something about all of those creatures in the cellar. And the husband said, yes, I'm gonna start working on them. And he comes out from his barn with this huge knife and he is sharpening and sharpening the knife and open the cellar doors. And the bear was there first, closer. And he said, well, Daddy, what are you doing with, Daddy is like a polite way to address an older person. What are you doing with that knife? Oh, well, I am gonna skin you and use the skins, the fur from your skin to make really nice, very good, warm winter clothes, because winter is very, very harsh here. Oh, please don't do that. I can bring you a lots of honey if you let me go. Well, the man said, yes, well, okay, if you think so, let's go. I'm gonna let you go, but make sure you come back with the honey. Then he's keep sharpening his knife and keep sharpening his knife. And now the wolf is watching very attentively. And he said, well, Daddy, what are you gonna do with that knife? Well, I'm gonna skin you and use your good skin and fur to make really good hats for myself and my wife that will be good for the winter. Oh, please let me go. You know, if you let me go, I can bring you an entire flock of sheep. Oh, wow. Let's see that. All right, well, I'm gonna let you go, but make sure you come back with those sheep that you said. And the wolf leaves. Now, what is left is there, the fox and the rabbit. And the fox promised the man who was still sharpening the knife, he said, well, if you let me go, I am gonna bring you a lot of hens and geese. If you let me go, they will be right in your front yard, right here. Okay, the man said, you can go, even, your fur and your skin is so beautiful to make really good decorations on the clothes, but, then he didn't have a clothes to decorate, so he let the fox go. And the last one, the rabbit said, really very scared and very humble. He said, well, if you let me go, I'm going to bring you a lot of good green vegetables like cabbage and kale, and you will like it, and carrots. Okay, you can go. Go and make sure you come back with what you promised. Well, sure enough, in a couple of nights, they hear a scratch on the door. Scratch, scratch, scratch at night. And the woman wakes up and turns to her husband, and he said, you know what? You need to go and see somebody scratching outside on the door. And the man goes there and opens the door, and right there in the door was the bear with a huge hive of honey that he brought to the man because he let him go. Well, he was very happy, put the honey away, went back to sleep. And then in a little time, scratch, scratch, scratch again. And then now it was kind of dawn, so it was a little light outside, was not that dark. And what he's seeing the wolf pushing inside, bringing inside, leading a bunch of sheep that he brought and left there in the front yard. And sure enough, a little bit later, the fox kept her promise, and the rabbit kept his promise. And sure enough, in a little while, these old and very poor people, they had enough to live on until the end of their lives. That's the story.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Adrian asked to be next. So Adrian, unmute yourself and you can be next.
Okay. Are you, oh, that's.
Whoa, what happened?
Are you spotlighting me at some point?
Yeah, I thought I did, but the screen jumped and I ended up spotlighting the wrong person.
Yeah,
There we go.
okay, there we are. Hello. Well, okay, so I'm working on a story, and I'm putting together our first public event for Family Promise of Riverside. And I don't know if you all know what Family Promise is, but we're a local affiliate of a national organization that helps stabilize families experiencing homelessness. And we just hired our executive director, and we're having our first event, and I'm the one who got the grant for the event and is putting it all together. And and actually I'll show you the banner for the movie. So so that's what we're doing on Saturday the 26th. And we're inviting families from the community in, and we're going to see Up, which is a great movie about finding home. And sometimes you find home by finding friends. And so anyway, and ahead of the movie, I'm going to be giving a little bit of a synopsis of what Family Promise is, but there's going to be a lot of kids there. And I thought, how can I make this clearer to the kids? And then I don't know how many of you got a chance to experience that storytelling concert a couple Saturdays ago that was based on social justice. That it was amazing. And and there were a lot of fairy tales and folk tales that spoke about social justice. And I thought, I can write one. So I'm going to read you the first portion that I've got the details filled out. And then at a certain point, I don't know if you all know Mark Lewis, wonderful storyteller, stuff goes here, where I have the rest of the story in mind, but I have to flesh out the details. So I'll get it started and then tell you where it's going. And I would love to know if you think it's just too cheesy and corny, or if it's working or whatever. So, okay. I don't know if I've got a title for it yet. I think I'm going to call it Forest Family or something like that. All right. Papa Turtle walked carefully down the forest path with a bundle of sticks and branches on his back. Behind him, bearing smaller bundles, were his two little turtles, Shelly and Coco. Papa Turtle was headed to the center of the lush wood he shared with a wide variety of animals. Every Saturday morning, he brought a bundle of sticks he had collected that week so that he could sell them at market in the glade for the other forest dwellers to use to light their cooking fires. Mama Turtle had already left earlier that morning with a basket of her baked goods to catch the early risers who were hungry for her blueberry treats and her carrot cake muffins. She looked forward to seeing Rabbit's bright orange and purple carrots with their fluffy green tops. They were so delicious, and everyone loved them in her muffins. Her eyes sparkled when she thought of the fat, juicy berries that Bear had gathered in the forest to sell at the market, although she knew he had probably eaten more of them than he had left to sell. They were just that irresistible. As Papa Turtle approached the clearing, he could smell the crisp lettuce and juicy tomatoes that Papa Piggy had brought from his garden, and the warm soup Mama Piggy had made from all of the fresh produce that the others in the forest sold in the clearing the last week. When he got to the glade, Papa Turtle found that Mama Turtle had already sold everything in her basket and had gathered the freshly milled flour that Fox sold from his wheat harvest, the warm milk that Goat had brought from his dairy, and the fresh eggs that Hen had toted in from her small house that she would need to make the next week's baked goods. Papa Turtle walked around the market and with Shelly and Coco following close behind and visited each place his friends sold their goods. Each week, he sold his twigs and branches and paid for the delicious ingredients Mama Turtle had gathered for her bakery goods. As he approached Rabbit first, Rabbit's ears drooped and he looked down at his large furry feet fidgeting in the soft grass. "Good morning, Rabbit," Papa Turtle greeted his old friend with a smile. "I've got some fine dried figs and branches for your cooking fires this week." "Good morning, Turtle," Rabbit responded with a shy smile. "Your twigs and branches look wonderful, but I no longer need them for my cooking fires." Puzzled, Turtle peered more closely up at Rabbit. "How can that be? Don't you need to cook this week?" "Yes, I do," Rabbit replied, "but I have a new cooking stove that uses the sun to heat it up, and I no longer need twigs to help me. Horse sold me one a few days ago, and it's wonderful." "That's so clever," said Turtle thoughtfully. "Ah, well, good for you then." And he ushered his children over to Woodpecker's beautiful shiny bottles of amber-colored maple syrup sparkling in the morning sun. As Turtle approached Woodpecker, peering from behind the jewel-toned bottles, he too smiled shyly at Turtle with his two little turtlettes. "Good morning, Woodpecker. What beautiful maple syrup you have this morning. You must have spent all week cooking the sap down to make such sweet treats. I have your twigs and branches for your cooking fire so you can make more this week." "Hey-o, Turtle, thanks for your kindness, but I no longer need twigs and branches for my cooking stove anymore. I got a new stove like Rabbit's, which heats up without them." Woodpecker peered down at his friend's sad face. "Well," replied Turtle slowly, that sounds great for your business. I'll continue my rounds to the other animals. "I think," said Woodpecker gently, "I think most of the other animals in the forest have gotten these new stoves." True enough, As Papa Turtle made his rounds to each of the animals in the clearing, praising their fine vegetables and fruits and other things they had made that week, one by one, they told the same story. They had all gotten these new stoves, except Piggy was getting his stove next week. He was waiting to see how everyone else's worked. So Turtle was only able to sell a few bundles of sticks to Piggy, which meant that Turtle didn't have enough coins to give Fox for the wheat, or Goat for his milk, or Henny for her eggs. But they gave Bear what they had from selling Mama Turtle's baked goods that morning to pay for the berries. Each of his fellow forest animals kindly told him Papa and Mama Turtle could pay for the other goods in the next week's market. Over the next week, Mama Turtle watched Papa Turtle gather and dry another bundle of good sticks and twigs to take to the market the next Saturday. Papa, she asked, how will you sell your sticks when no one needs them for their stoves? I don't know, he replied, pausing as he wrapped the bundles in his hands. It's the only thing I know how to do. Maybe they have other uses for the sticks. Maybe they need to build something or fix something. I have to try. Well, as you might have guessed, the next Saturday at the market in the clearing, Papa Turtle wasn't able to sell his twigs and sticks. No one needed to build or fix anything. Mama Turtle's baked goods sold well, but she was only able to pay for the flour that week, but no milk or eggs. Well, she thought, I can make bread even if I can't make muffins. In the next weeks that followed, the turtles went to the market to sell the bread that Mama Turtle had made with the little bit of flour she had bought. But they still owed Fox for some of the wheat, and Goat for his milk, and Henny for her eggs, and they could only buy smaller and smaller amounts of flour. One Saturday, Mama Turtle sent Papa and Shelly and Coco home ahead of her while she stayed at the market. Now, the story continues. I'll give you sort of the way it unfolds. Mama Turtle came home without her shell. She had used her shell to pay for all the goods in order to bake some new things for the next week. And one by one, everyone in the family had to sell their shells and trade them for the food that they needed at the market in the clearing until, well, let's see, Papa was wearing a bicycle helmet, and Shelly found an old shoebox, and Coco, well, he found a coconut shell of all things. And Mama, well, she found a basket. She took one of her baskets for her muffins and made it into her shell. And they were quite the sight in the forest. But unfortunately, the kids at school, didn't like the stinky shoebox and called Shelly Smelly Shelly. And they teased Coco because he had this coconut shell, and they kept calling him Coco Nut. And the kids were just being so mean and they didn't know what to do. They didn't have anything else to sell. Well, one of the friends in the forest, who is very good at woodworking, helped them. Beaver came forward and said, I think I can help you figure out some things to do with your sticks. And he welcomed him into his wood shop and helped him learn how to make chairs and stools with his sticks. While Beaver worked on something in the corner, he would never let Papa Turtle see what it was, but he was always hard at work at something in the corner. And pretty soon Papa became pretty good at making chairs and making stools. And right about the time he was ready to sell some of them, Beaver showed him what he'd been working on. He had taken some beautiful redwood and mahogany and oak, and he had created these beautiful hand-polished wooden shells so that Papa and Mama and Coco and Shelly could all have beautiful new shells to put on. Well, so they went to market that next Saturday wearing their beautiful new shells that glistened in the morning sun. And Papa brought his stools and chairs, and everyone was so excited to buy them because they were kind of tired of standing at the market anyway, and they needed something to sit on. And so as a result of all of these families coming together in the forest, Papa and Mama and Shelly and Coco had new shells to wear to protect them. And Papa learned a new trade, and Mama was able to keep doing the work that she was doing, making everyone happy with her baked goods. And I got to figure out how to land this thing and make it end. So it's not just, and they lived happily ever after, but essentially that's where I'll drop it right now. So that's my story of the forest friends and family.
Good. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't know if it's worth, I mean, I'm probably going to cut out some of the detail early on, because I was just having fun just typing the story, and I realized, okay, I got to kind of cut this down. But I don't know if it's worth telling it, doing a little 5-minute version of it at the event, or if doesn't quite get across, the idea of helping people find housing and helping them learn how to learn new trades so they can get a job and afford stuff. So I don't know what I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I knowing what your event was and listening to the story, I was very touched by it and really could see the connection where, there's such a stigmatization of people who do not have a home. And this kind of just shows what the process is that leads people to get there. So I thought that was really valuable and really brought tears to my eyes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did want to work into the story a way of making it clear that it wasn't anybody's fault that they didn't have homes, that they didn't have their shells. Things changed, and Papa had to find a new way to provide. So thank you. That was what I was aiming for, at least, and that part of it, kind of setting that up. Good. Okay.
It's really a very nice story, and I found it very dynamic. And you know what? If you would find a good somebody to design, a good illustrator, you can publish that. It's a good book to publish. Of course, as a story, it's really nice, and I like that it's dynamic. But it is actually gorgeous, and with all of those animals, and I see the glaze with that beautiful trees and orchids, and it could be a very, very beautiful, aesthetically beautiful book for children.
Thank you. That's a really good idea. I could actually do it as like a fundraising tool for Family Promise, and find an illustrator, and we could donate, the royalties and such from it to Family Promise. Thank you. That's a nice idea. I appreciate that. I tried to make it very visual. So
yes,
good.
It is.
Thank you.
It is visual. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for listening, you guys.
Just one more quick thing. I think another element of the story that's so meaningful and really kind of chokes me up was that they needed support.
Yeah.
They needed someone to help open the pathway. They couldn't just do it alone. And that's such a big thing that we forget.
Yeah. And I think as I build out the story, I'm going to have more of the animals involved in, like, they get a few extra carrots thrown in from rabbit and a few extra berries from bear, and, that everyone's coming together and helping them. So good. Yeah. Cause that's the thing, is there are people around the church, Magnolia Presbyterian, where we're going to have this event, who don't want the church to be one of our host sites for a homeless family for, a few weeks or a month before they move on to the next host site in our affiliate, because they think homeless, oh no. And they don't realize that, it takes a community to support a family. And this organization not only helps them find housing, more than 80% of the time they find permanent housing, it keeps the kids enrolled in school, it helps them succeed, and it really brings the community together. So thank you for mentioning that. I'll try to work some more of that into the story.
Very good. Thank you. So who would like to be next? Walter, okay. Let me put the spotlight on you and you take the mute off.
Okay. Well, as I was listening to your story, Adrian, I don't know, something popped into my head, something that isn't done anymore, although as a kid I enjoyed it, was the flannel board stories. You know how you cut out little flannel board things and you like put a character up and then talk about it, and then you could, and I was thinking as you were talking, yeah, you could have a flannel board story. I don't think anybody does that anymore, but anyway, that's what stuck into my head. That's how I was visualizing it.
I was thinking about some sort of visual. We're going to have about 100 to 150 people spread out in the church parking lot. So if I could find a way to make, yeah, exactly. If I find a way to make some really beautiful slides, I would. But yeah, I know what you mean. It calls for visuals. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I was going to tell since it's March, I thought I would tell an Irish story in honor of St. Patrick's Day. And this is the story, I'm sure that you probably have all heard it before a million times, but it's Finn McCool. If you're not familiar with Finn McCool, he was the greatest, most famous giant in all of Ireland. And when he was born, he was no bigger than a fire-breathing dragon, which by giant standards was a wee bit on the small side. His father was King Cool, and he was a famous giant himself and a very proud man. And when he saw the little Finn, he picked him up in his hand and said, "He's no bigger than my thumb." And he was disgusted with him. And he was not known to be a very kind giant. And so he took Finn up to the very tallest tower of his castle, and he booted him off way down into the loch. Well, it just so happened that his grandmother was watching the entire thing from across the loch. And when she saw Finn drop into the water, she said, "Goodness gracious, that's my own flesh and blood splashing about." And so she dove in and she pulled him out by the hair and she adopted him and took care of him. She brought him into her own home and she fed him a nice diet of peat moss and tree bark with a few grubs thrown in. And in spite of that, he grew to an enormous size rather quickly. It wasn't long before he was too big for her to take care of. And so she told him, as he was still just a young boy, that he was going to have to leave and fend for himself. Now, such an inauspicious beginning has been known to spoil a man's disposition completely, but not Finn. He kissed his grandmother on the head and then went off to do great deeds. And he was pretty strong. He was stronger than a dozen oxen and faster than a herd of sheep, or a herd of deer, I should say. And he went off and did many great things to honor himself. And when he was old enough, he found a beautiful giantess named Una, which he married. And he took her home and he built a house on the very top of a steep mountain called, oh brother, I forgot it. Knockmany Hill, Knockmany Mountain. Many people wondered why he built his house on the top of such a lonely, windy place. He never told, but the real reason was to keep a lookout for Cuchulainn. Now, Cuchulainn, the very name sent shivers up his spine. He was the largest, strongest, and meanest giant in all of Ireland. And he had hunted down and pummeled every giant in Ireland except for one, and that was Finn McCool. And that was owing to the fact that whenever Finn saw him coming, he ran in the opposite direction. Well, it just so happened that Finn was working with his band of giants called the Finians, and they were working on the coast of Ireland, making a causeway from Ireland to Scotland. And he and his friends were moving around a few cliffs and hills when Finn stuck his thumb into his mouth. Now, it's not well known, but the giants of Ireland in the olden days often possessed extraordinary powers in one of their fingers. And it just so happened that Finn's power was in his thumb. And the extraordinary power that he had was the ability to see the near future. So when he stuck his thumb into his mouth, he could tell what was about to happen. And when he stuck his thumb in his mouth just now, he saw a vision of Cuchulainn coming for him. So he quickly ran home, went up to his little house, shut the door, and looked out the window to see if he'd been followed. Now, his wife, Una, was in the kitchen busily kneading some dough. She had two 50-pound lumps of dough, which she was kneading to make into his bread. "Ah, you're home early today, Finn," she said. "Yes," he said, looking out the window. She said, "Why are you home so early?" "Well, I got the notion that Cuchulainn was coming for me." And so he looked around the room and he saw that his infant son was not there. And he said, "Where's Junior?" He's over with my sister for the day," she said. Well, he went to the kitchen to get a drink after running all that way home. And he's asked Una to look out the window and keep a lookout for Cuchulainn. As he was in the kitchen, he said, "Do you see any sign of him?" She said, "No, I don't see Cuchulainn. All I see is this mountain coming our way." "Mountain? A mountain coming our way? That's not a mountain, that's Cuchulainn." And so he looked out and saw Cuchulainn was on his way. "Oh, what'll I do? What'll I do?" Well, Una was not only beautiful, she was also very clever. And she had an idea, a plan. She said, "Okay, listen." And she told him her plan. Finn wasn't too pleased with the idea, but he didn't have much choice. So he put on his baby's bonnet, which he stuffed his head into, and then he climbed into his baby's crib, which he was hanging out everywhere, arms and legs. And just about that time, Cuchulainn came bursting through the door, scattering splinters and rock and mortar everywhere. He was a bit too big to fit through the door. "Where's Finn?" he said. And Una acted as though this was nothing unusual whatsoever. She said, "Oh, Finn, I'm afraid he's gone for the day. He heard that there was some big bully giant looking for him down at the causeway, so he ran off to find him." "Oh, that's too bad," said Cuchulainn. "I'll wait for him here." "Well, you'll be sorry when he comes back," said Una. But there was no deterring Cuchulainn. He was intent on waiting for Finn to return. So she said, "Well, there's a bit of wind coming through the hole that you just made. Would you mind turning the house for me?" "Turning the house?" "Yes, turn it to a little more favorable direction to the wind, please. Since Finn is gone, he would normally do that." Well, this was quite new. Cuchulainn couldn't imagine that someone would actually pick up a house, an entire stone house, and turn it on such a trivial thing as to get it away from the wind. But he grabbed his pinky and gave it 3 pulls. Now, it just so happens, just as Finn's extraordinary power was in his thumb, Cuchulainn's extraordinary power was in his pinky. That's where he kept all of his strength. So he gave it 3 pulls because he knew he was going to have to lift a house. He went out and put his big arms around it, and he lifted it off its foundation and turned it away from the wind. Then he came back in. As he came in, he noticed that Una was kneading this dough. Well, when Cuchulainn wasn't looking, she had taken out an iron griddle and kneaded it into one of the loaves of bread and had stuck them in the oven. When the bread was done, she pulled it out and she said, "Would you like something to eat?" I'm sure Finn would be very offended if he did not show hospitality to his guest. So she gave him a loaf of bread, which he bit into with great strength. "Oh, blood and thunder," he yelled. "You broke my teeth." He had bitten right into the iron griddle. And she says, "Oh, I'm so terribly sorry, I forgot. That's Finn's special bread. He likes it because it sharpens his teeth," he says. "Oh, how could anyone eat this bread?" "Oh, that's nothing," she said. "Even Junior eats the bread." And she gave Finn, pretending to be the baby, a loaf of bread, but this one didn't have a griddle in it, and he gobbled it down. To Cuchulainn's amazement, "Let me take a little closer look at this baby," he said. He couldn't believe this Finn. Not only did he pick up houses and move them around for just no reason at all, he also had a baby that was a giant size. How huge Finn must be. So he began to say, I think I have misjudged Finn. I have been going around telling everyone that he was a coward and a weakling. I think I owe him an apology. So I'm going to wait right here until he comes back, and then I will apologize. And besides, I want to meet him. He must be some giant. Well, this was something that they hadn't counted on. And at the thought of having Cuchulainn stay and Finn have to pretend to be a baby, they thought, this is terrible. And Finn began to groan out, "Oh no." "What's the matter with him?" said Cuchulainn. "Oh, he's just teething," said Una. "Teething, eh? Well, I know how to fix that. Just what my mother did." And so he pulled out of his pouch a little bottle of nice Irish whiskey, and he coated some of it on his little finger. And he said, I'll just massage a little bit of this into your gums. It'll make it feel better." So he came up to Finn and he pried open his mouth and began to massage his gums with whiskey. Well, this was just too much. Finn groaned all the more. And Una was desperate for an idea. Well, she didn't have any more clever tricks, so she thought, I know what I'll do. She reached into the fireplace and pulled out a large iron kettle, and she heaved it straight at Cuchulainn's head with every ounce of strength that she had. Only it didn't hit Cuchulainn. It actually hit Finn in the back of the head, and it hit him so hard that he chomped down right on Cuchulainn's little finger. He chomped down so hard that he bit it off. "What have you done to my little finger?" Well, that was the very finger that contained all of his strength. And so he began to shrink right before their eyes. until he was shriveled to the size of a mouse. And their tomcat chased him out of the house, and Cuchulainn was never to be seen again.
Hey, that's great. That's a great story. I haven't ever heard that one before.
Ah,
Very great, really great. Thank you.
That was an absolutely fabulous story. I've heard, I knew some of the references, but I never heard the narrative. It was just great.
I needed a good Irish story to get me into my my Celtic heritage. So that was awesome. That was really fun.
Yeah. Okay. So, Penny, do you have a story tonight?
Well, actually, no, I don't have a story. I have a poem.
Okay.
And it's not mine. I was thinking there's a event going on Friday. That's an Irish someone's being featured doing Irish stories, and I thought, and they were inviting participants. So I thought, well, what if I got this little that I can do? And I remembered a poem of Yeats's that I learned a long time ago. And I used to pull it out, and because it's short, fairly short. And I thought, but I haven't done it in years. And then I thought, I can go to Inland Storytelling and I can do it there. So it's perfect after that story. Thank you very much, Walter. I haven't heard Finn McCool stories in a long time. It's Yeats's poem, The Stolen Child. Where dips the rocky highland of Sleuth Wood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake the drowsy water rats. There we've hid our fairy vats full of berries and reddest stolen cherries. Come away, O human child, to the water and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wave of moonlight glosses the dim gray sands with light, far off by furthest Rosses, we've footed all the night, weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances, till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles and is anxious in its sleep. Come away, O human child, to the water and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wandering water gushes from the hills above Glencar, and pools among the rushes that scarce could bathe the star, we seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ears, give them unquiet dreams, leaning softly out from ferns that drop their tears over the young streams. Come away, O human child, to the water and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world is full of weeping than you can understand, is more full of weeping than you can understand. Away with us he's going, the solemn-eyed. He'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hob sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bob round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the water and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, from a world more full of weeping than he can understand. The Stolen Child by Yeats.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I was at a storytelling conference years ago, and a story swap of all things. And someone said, well, I don't have a story, but I have a poem. And he sat as though it was already in his head and he'd just written it. And he came out with this, and I said, I've got to have that poem. So I haven't. I'm sorry. I was. It was a little unfair because I really did have the text in front of me
That's okay.
because I haven't gone through it in a long time.
That's okay. Thank you for sharing it. Great poem.
But it's a wonderful story, and I've used to do it a lot. Yeah.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, I'm the only one left.
Well, John.
And I indeed do have a story. Get the spotlight on me. And I got the story from a book. I don't know if you can see the title if I put it up and hold it still.
Nope.
Come back.
No, the book keeps disappearing into your background.
Okay.
Please tell.
Oh, wait, there you go.
Margaret puts down a little bit. Yeah.
Tales. And they are put together by David Holt and Bill Mooney. And the story, so they had different storytellers submit their favorite stories and be willing to publish them for people to use. And this particular story is a story from Northern Ireland by Maggie Kerr Pierce. And it's called The Story of the Half Blanket. And I actually have heard other versions of this story, the main storyline, but I had never heard this one. So The Story of the Half Blanket. Once there was a farmer and a son that lived in a valley in Northern Ireland. They had sheep in the hills, a cow in the byre, and a wean of chickens in the yard. The mother had died many years before, but the two males got along just fine and divided up the labors and were quite happy. The old man took care of the house and the yard, and the young man took the sheep up into the hills and watched them and was happy-go-lucky and very contented with his life. And they lived that way for a while until the young man met a young woman that caught his fancy. And he married her and brought her home. Now, you might think that might upset the harmony in the home, but actually, it made things better. For the old man did adequately, but the house could have been tidier. And with a woman in the house, she was a better cook than the old man was and did an excellent job caring for things, keeping things tidy in the house. And they all got along quite well together. She was very much in love with her husband, and she liked her husband's father. Well, 9.5 months later, a baby was born, and this upset the apple cart. This baby changed everything, and the reason it did is because the young man, who had always been happy-go-lucky, suddenly became serious and felt the responsibility of having a family. And he became irritable, and he took it out on his father. And he would criticize his father for not working hard enough and moving very slow and not taking care of the chickens and the cow and the yard and the garden as well as he used to. And at the dinner table, he criticized his father for eating sloppily and sometimes spilling food. And as the young child grew and became a toddler and walking around and learned how to speak, the young man would criticize his father for not setting a good example for his grandson. And I guess he had a bad habit of spitting into the fire. And so one day or one night, the young man said to his father, "You have become a burden on this household. You're no longer contributing like you should be, and you're setting a bad example for my son. Tomorrow, I'm going to take you to the poorhouse and leave you there." And then he looked at his wife and he said, "Go find that blanket that you wove, as that was part of your dowry, and we'll give him the blanket to take with him to the poorhouse." Well, she was upset. She loved her father-in-law. And so with tears in her eyes, she got the blanket out of a cupboard. And when she took it out, in those days, Northern Ireland could get kind of cold. And so the blankets were really, really long. And they were long enough you could fold them over double to keep you warm at night on your bed. And when the young man saw how big that blanket was, he said, "Oh, that's much too big. Cut it in half and we'll keep half here, and he can take half to the poorhouse." And his wife was upset, and she would have nothing of this. She had worked very hard to make that blanket, and she was not going to cut it in half no matter what he said. And then the young son spoke up and he said, "Da, don't listen to Ma. Have her cut it in half and make sure she puts the half we keep in a place we can find, so that when you grow old, I'll know where to get it to give to you when we take you to the poorhouse." Well, when his son said that, the father, it was like he was hit with a ton of bricks. It completely changed his attitude. And he said, "Oh, well, maybe we won't take him to the poorhouse." And he started treating his father better. And from then on, they got along just fine and lived happily ever after.
I love
This
that.
is a great, yeah, go ahead.
I've heard versions of that
Yeah,
where the complaint was that the grandfather ate sloppily, and so they moved him to a different table off away from the rest of the family to eat by himself. And the young son was seen play acting, and the father said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm practicing how I'm going to bring food to you, and you have to eat at your own separate table when you become old."
yeah,
this
right.
same kind of result. It opened the eyes of the young father to.
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
it told where it was the wife who became disgusted with her father-in-law.
Oh,
So
really? Huh?
I love this version. You did it just beautifully, because as soon as you gave us the title, I knew the story.
Yeah.
But every version's different. Then there's the
Yes.
begging bowl where the guys, the old man's put behind the stove and
Yeah.
made to eat out of a wooden bowl, and the young man finds his son carving a wooden bowl.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that one too.
It's the same kind of thing, but it was just, thank you. That was wonderful. And it's so Irish. Oh my goodness.
Well, we all had stories to share. That's wonderful. Unfortunately, I never saw Chris join. Oh, there she is. So she got to hear him, hopefully got to hear him. Do you have a story to share, Chris? I don't know if she's in the room.
She's partly present, but not entirely.
I'm gonna click on.
Oh, there she is.
Have a story ready. Thank you for asking.
You don't have a story?
No,
Okay.
all right. Thank you, though.
All right. Did you get to hear all the stories? Oh, she's mute again. Anyway,
Okay.
I think I'm going to stop the recording at this time.